That helps.
I was going to give this entire talk muted. That would have been funny. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Glenn. My name is James, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm really happy to be here. Glenn, I appreciate you asking me to share. I just, excuse me, just having found out that my wife spoke here and my mom spoke here, I'm now a little bit more nervous than before because I know those are my two favorite AA speakers. So I know that they have set the bar really, really high. And I'm just going to slide right under that bar, hopefully with dignity and grace. We'll see. Anyway, um, I live in Tallahassee, Florida now. My sobriety date is January the 3rd, 1984. Got sober at the age of 21, and I'm now 60. So I've spent the majority of my adult life as a sober person. What else can I tell you? I have a sponsor. His name is Doug, and he lives in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And he got sober on Valentine's Day, 1975. And yeah, Mickey just left a note in the chat, and I feel sorry for her because she heard me just a couple of weeks ago in Arizona. Actually, that was like face to face in person. It was amazing. And it was really great to be at that conference because, first of all, it was in a beautiful place above Payson, Arizona. And then the second is we were all together. It was out in the woods. It's really, really amazing. All right. What can I tell you? I should start with a joke. I always start with a joke, they say, right? So I have one joke, just one. This is my joke. I made this joke up. And here it comes. You ready? It's about my mom, who happens to be on this meeting right now. Polly P. She's quite well known. And usually this joke works better when, there's a group that can participate in the joke. So I'm just going to try to set it up so it works over Zoom. We're going to see if that happens. Okay. So I start this joke by saying, my mom's name is Polly P. Generally, when I say that to a large, group of alcoholics, there's bound to be people in there that know who my mom is. Because, if ever there was a rock star, it's her. And there's a little hum that goes through the room, like, oh my gosh. And I ask, does anyone here know what the P stands for? And invariably, someone will yell out, pistol. And I'll say this. I'll say, that's right, Polly Pistol. Now, is that a perfect name for my mom? Is she a pistol or what? And then people would say, yeah, she's a pistol. And then I would say the joke, which is this. Well, if you think she's a pistol now, you should have seen her loaded. That's my joke. It doesn't work as well online. I just doesn't. But trust me, it can be funny at times. It depends on my delivery. Okay, that's it. I am not like a jokester or joke teller or anything. I'll just share my story. Uh, like I said, I'm an alcoholic. I got sober at the age of 21 and a half. My first drink was at the age of 15. So I drank for 6.5 years. I never should have become an alcoholic. I'll tell you why. I never should have drank, but I did. My last drink came on January 3rd. I'm sorry, my first drink came on in September of 1977. And, we alcoholics always talk about our first drink, so I should kind of tell you a little bit about that. The first thing I need to tell you is that my first drink was not alcohol. It was one of those outside issues that we hear people talk about in AA. I won't go into any details as to which outside issue it was, but all I'll say is rolling papers were involved. So I'll just leave it at that. And I should tell you about who I was at this time when I had my first drink. I can tell you that I showed up to school this day in September of 77 at the age of 15. And this day, I felt the same as I had felt for as long as I could remember. I felt apart from, less than, different, unloved, unlovable. I didn't feel like I fit. I felt like an outsider. Uh, and here I show up to school. Now, like I said, that's how I always felt. I don't remember not feeling that way in my life. I'm sure there was a time where I didn't feel that way, but didn't remember it. I still don't remember before the age of 15 ever feeling that, not feeling that way. And got to school that day, and this guy comes up to me, and I didn't know who he was. I was a sophomore. My high school was grades 10, 11, and 12. So I was a sophomore. This senior came up to me and he said, "Hey, you want to come with us?" And I didn't know this guy. And I said, "Sure." So I went with someone I didn't know, off to a place I'd never been to do something I didn't even know what we were going to do. And out come those rolling papers, and you figure the rest of it. That thing got passed around. And something happened to me that day uh, that I had never experienced in my life to this point. And it happened to be the very thing I was looking for, and I didn't even know I was looking for it. And what happened was my entire life changed in a matter of moments. Uh, and the place it changed the most was in my mind. And right here, kind of in the middle of me. Okay. I should mention that before I had this first drink, I was walking around. I always walked around feeling this way. I felt like there was this ache right behind my sternum right here, with this chronic ache, and it always hurt. It was like a tightness and it just was like a pain I always had. And when we did that thing, I instantly, just like that, it changed. I found relief physically, and I found relief mentally for the first time that I knew in my entire life. And I was pretty happy about that. And I'm going to tell you, there's a definition of an alcoholic, which is that we have this physical allergy thing. That moment was like turning on a fire hose for me. And I was drunk and or under the influence of other outside issues every day for 6.5 years. I mean, there was no social drinking, none of that. It was like I wasn't, and then I was all the time. And that's what happened to me that day. Now, I never should have drank. The main reason why is that my mom's an alcoholic, as I mentioned. And I need to tell a little bit about her story in order to tell you my story. So I'll make her part of this really brief. She was a bad alcoholic. And towards the end of 1976, I was 14 years old. I had a brother who was 16. My mom started to go to in and out of detoxes in Tarrant County, Texas, which is suburbs of Fort Worth. I think I saw someone here from Wichita Falls, so hi. Anyway, started going in and out of detoxes there around Fort Worth, Texas, and got introduced to AA. She liked AA. She thought it was great, but she didn't think she was alcoholic, and she didn't want to live. So she decided to die by suicide in early 1976. So what did I say? Maybe I was wrong. Let me back up. She started to go into treatment at the end of 1975. No, 1976. So in early 1977, she decided she didn't want to live anymore. So she decided to get a bottle of pills from an Air Force doctor. My dad was in the Air Force. And a bottle of scotch from the liquor store. She checked herself into a motel, ate that bottle of pills, and drank that bottle of scotch, and waited to die. She was discovered by a friend who dialed 911, and the ambulance came and picked her up. and she flatlined on the way to the hospital, which means alcohol and drugs killed her for a moment, and they resuscitated her, obviously, because she's here today. Hi, Mom. Glad you're here. They resuscitated her. When she came to, the doctor said, you were dead. We brought you back. I suggest you not drink again. And that wasn't her last drink. Her last drink came shortly after because, as my mom puts it, when you try to take your own life, you get the attention of the authorities. And the authorities were very attentive to my mom in the sense that they put her in a psych ward for 72 hours, long enough for my dad to get a judge to court committed her treatment. Now, let me tell you a little about my dad. My dad was an Air Force officer. He served in Vietnam in 71, 72. As we believe, as a result of him being exposed to Agent Orange, he got sick, very sick. But kind of a functioning sick person. And he was married, my mom and he were married. And he was kind of the classic enabling spouse of an alcoholic. And when my mom started to go to Alcoholics Anonymous at the end of 1976, my dad started to go to Al-Anon. Excuse me, started going to Al-Anon. And they in very short order, the program of Al-Anon transformed my dad from a enabling spouse of an alcoholic to a guy who went before a judge to get his wife court committed to treatment. And here's what I believe, and I don't think there's anything anyone can say to make me not believe this right now. Because he did that, my mom got sober. I don't think she would have got sober otherwise. And because she got sober, I got sober. I'm going to tell you about that in a little bit. So I really do credit my dad for the fact that I'm sober today. And if I credit my dad, what I'm really doing is crediting the program of Al-Anon. So if anyone here is in Al-Anon or loves someone in Al-Anon, I just want to say that I'm so grateful for that program. All right. Where was I? So she's in treatment. And the treatment center, here's where I come in. The treatment center had something called Family Day. Now, one of the things that's important to note is by the time I went to this treatment facility event, Family Day, here's what I knew about alcoholism. I wasn't there. I wasn't in the ambulance, but I heard about it. Here's what I learned. Here's what I knew. If you're an alcoholic and you drink, you're going to die. That's what I heard. So that's all I knew when I went to this treatment thing. And we met with a therapist who was she met with the family, and I think the whole purpose of it was to educate the kids. Here's mom, she's an alcoholic, here's what that means, right? I was 14, I'd never heard the word really, I don't remember. And she started describing alcoholism. And I don't know much about her other than because it's the only time I ever saw her, but I believe she was credible. I believe that she knew what she was talking about. And therefore, I believe that what she said was true. Okay. I don't know if what she said is true, but I believed it. That's what's important. And she said, she started to describe alcoholism. Here's what your mom suffers from. And I'm going to tell you, as a 14-year-old kid, I identified with a whole bunch of it. Like she said. Now, by the way, I'm gonna share with you what she said, which is what I heard that day as a 14-year-old. Not every alcoholic matches these characteristics I'm about to share with you. So if you're really interested in what makes an alcoholic, it's very well described in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, so what I want to share with you is what I heard that day. And I heard this. She said, alcoholics are people who are uncomfortable in their own skin. They don't feel like they fit. They don't feel like they belong. And I just told you, I felt that way every day of my life. I never knew, I don't think I ever remember not feeling that way. She also said alcoholics are people who have a vision of the way the world should
I
be.
actually never asked.
Hello. All right, thanks, Glenn. Uh, Alcoholics are people who have an idea of how the world should be. Okay. And what that means is they have this vision of this perfect universe,
I did not ask.
perfect, perfect world. And uh, they think that if the world became that way, then everyone would be happy, including the alcoholic. So I'll have you know that I felt the same way. I had this idea of the way the world should be, and I really wanted you guys to follow my program, but you never did. And if you had, you'd been really happy about it too. And by the way, it says that very thing in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's talking about step 3. A lot of other things about the alcoholic that she described that I identified with. And then she said, the therapist said this, and I have not been able to confirm that this is true. I don't know that it's true. It's certainly not in any AA approved literature. So I share this with you just to say that this is what I heard at the age of 14. Okay. What she said when I was 14 was this: if you're a child of an alcoholic, you have a 50-50 chance of being an alcoholic yourself. And again, I don't know if that's true, but I believed it was. So here I learned in this thing, this event, or this meeting, I learned a couple of important things. First, uh, I identify with many characteristics of an alcoholic. I never had a drink. And second, I'm a child of an alcoholic, therefore I have a really good chance of being an alcoholic myself. And because I identified so much and I had this chance, here's what I knew. I knew I was going to be alcoholic if I drank. I knew it. It was just something that I knew. Okay. Now, sitting in that room was my brother, who was 16 at the time. And I thought if 50-50, right? If it's going to be one of us, it's going to be me and not him. I will report to you, however, that about 4 years ago, my brother came into Alcoholics Anonymous, he got sober. So in our family, it was 100%. So 100% of the offspring are alcoholic. And how lucky are we, right? Anyway, uh, so what I got that day was a very important thing. I was given the gift of self-knowledge. And I thought that was enough. Okay, I know I'm going to be an alcoholic. I got this. I'm going to beat this thing. You just watch, right? And the big book is very clear about the fact that self-knowledge is not enough for people like me. So if I'm going to get sober, I'm going to have to get self-knowledge is not going to help me. But I thought at that time it would, right? So I said to myself at the age of 14, if I drink, I'm going to be alcoholic. Alcoholics who drink die. Therefore, I'm never going to drink. And I did not. So it was a choice I made at the age of 14, and I didn't drink for a total of 5 months until September 1977 rolled around. And I just told you about my experience and how it changed my life, and the fire hose turned on and I was off. And let me tell you something, there's a part of me kind of in the back of my head that said, man, this may not be a good idea because, you know, um, uh, alcoholics, people who, if they're alcoholics and drink, they're going to die. And I just basically said, I'm not, I'll figure it out. I'll figure this thing out. So I started down the road. I'm going to tell you that I'm not a purist member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I loved alcohol. I drank a lot of it, but it was not the only thing that I did. I don't know if it was being the age of 15 when I started, or it being the summer of 1977, the fall of 77. I often ask, is anybody here remember 1977? Was anyone there? And the folks who were there, they probably don't remember it either. Anyway, so I was there, and I did a lot of outside issues. And I won't belabor the point, but I just want to share in case some of you can identify with this, that Smoked a lot of pot, snorted a lot of coke, took a lot of pills. Basically, whatever you had on you and willing to give to me is what I wanted. And I say that just because it's the truth, but the other reason is because um, I identify as an alcoholic. Number one, because I had issues with the substance alcohol, but the other is because I identify with alcoholism. And to me, the alcoholism I identify with is when I start drinking, I can't uh, predict how much I'm going to drink. Call that the allergy of the body. And when I'm not drinking, all I'm thinking about is drinking. And those are the things that I identify with. So I am an alcoholic. I as I said, I was drunk or under the influence of something every single day, almost every single day for 6.5 years. It was the way I wanted to be, and I never had a problem. I always, throughout my drinking, here's what I knew. I was not an alcoholic. Why? Because I knew what an alcoholic was. I learned it way back when I was a kid. An alcoholic is someone who drinks and then loses jobs, wrecks cars, gets divorced, homeless, down the line, right? So these are all descriptions of an alcoholic having these things happen. And none of those things happened to me in my drinking. And so I had it in my head. I'm not an alcoholic because none of these things have happened. Number one. Number two, I really want to be drunk right now. The other thing about alcohol, my um, idea of alcoholism was that when my mom got sober, I was kind of, some months after she got sober, I was kind of going down the road to my own alcoholism. And she decided to take matters into her own hands. Always get a kick out of this. And she started saying things to me to try to help me that had the absolute opposite effect. And one of those things was she would say to me, James, we're saving a seat for you in AA. I can't wait for you to get here. You can join my home group. I've got a sponsor picked out to you. His name is Mark. He's great. And you and I will trudge this road of happy destiny together. And I was like, I don't think so. Now, I first heard this at the age of 15, and I heard it repeatedly for years. Okay, so put yourself in my shoes. How would you have reacted to that? My reaction was, I don't think so. Oh no, last place on earth I want to be. Don't want to be in AA. I had this image of AA that everyone in it was a loser. I don't believe that now. Everyone's in it was a loser, and it's like the last place on earth I want to be. So I didn't want to be in AA. So as throughout my drinking, I did not think I was an alcoholic. I did not want to be in AA, and I wanted to be drunk. That's how it was, 6.5 years. So let me tell you about the end of things. I was towards the end. I became kind of a lone wolf, described in Bill's story. How that looked in my life was I would wake up in the morning, I'd get whatever I needed that day, with some alcohol and anything else. I'd jump behind the wheel of my Buick Skylark, and this is 1983, you guys. So I got behind the wheel of my Buick Skylark, off I drove, and getting drunk. And I drove drunk basically every day toward the ends of my drinking. Thank God nothing terrible happened, but I still am very remorseful about that fact. But anyway, I did that. And I was pretty much by myself. I lived in a house in North Richland Hills, Texas, with about 5 other alcoholic dope fiends like myself, and I never felt so alone. I remember my last drink came shortly after New Year's Eve, 1983. So I went to a New Year's Eve party on December 31st, 1983. I got extremely drunk, very wasted, and ended up blacking out. And I didn't come to until January 3rd. Now, here's what I believe. And I believe this because it was true up till December 31st. I believe that on January 2nd, I was not an alcoholic. I wanted to be drunk. Okay? And then I came to on January 3rd, and I realized I'm an alcoholic. I was like, oh my God, I'm an alcoholic. And I like that word realized because it shares a lot with the word reality, right? So I entered this space of reality. I'm an alcoholic. And the second thing, that's a miracle, by the way. Second miracle happened shortly thereafter. I realized I wanted to be sober. And I didn't understand this at the time, but looking back at this experience, what I realized is that in that moment, I came to that day in a state of surrender. Okay. And I think about it, and I think what really happened was that I was surrendered, right? I didn't surrender. I came to surrendered. And I was like, man. And I knew it was over. I was done. I knew no more drinking. It's no longer part of my life. And there's I hear a lot of folks in AA introducing themselves. I'm so and so, and I'm an alcoholic, and God separated me from alcohol on such and such a day. And I believe that's exactly what happened to me that day. Looking back, what happened, I believe, is that God reached into my life, a higher power in my life, reached into my life and touched me in such a way that alcohol was removed. And I have no other explanation than that. I'm almost positive the day before I was not an alcoholic and wanted to be drunk. And here was January 3rd, I'm an alcoholic and I want to be sober. And that can't happen in my power. And I have no power to do that. It just happened to me. I'm very grateful about that. But however, here I am, 21 and a half years old. So what do you do if you're 21 and a half and you just realize that you're alcoholic and you want to be sober? So I did a really lame thing. So I'm going to ask y'all, please don't judge me, okay? No judgment. Here it comes. Ready? I called my mom. All right, so big tough guy from Texas. I get on the phone and I say, hey, Mom, you're not going to believe this. I'm an alcoholic. And she said, hey, James, no kidding. I've known this for a while. And then she said, oh, my prayers have been answered. And I go, here she goes again. This prayer thing. It's God thing. And then I said, Mom, I want what you have. I want to be sober. And she said, James, if you want what I have and want to be sober, you need to go to AA. And I said, Mom, I don't want it that bad. And I hung up the phone. Click. Because I didn't want to go to AA. I'm telling you, it was the last place I wanted to be, Alcoholics Anonymous. Can you imagine how uncool it is following mommy into AA? I mean, come on. That's not what I want to do. I have my own life, do my own thing. So I said, no, thanks. Hung up the phone. Now, what I realized what happened that day is, as I mentioned, I came to in the state of surrender. Just came to that way. And I knew it was over for me. And by the way, that's my sobriety date, January 3rd, 1984. I haven't had a drink since. But I woke up in a state of surrender. Then I got on the phone, called my mom. She said, go to AA. I said, I want it that bad. And I hung up the phone. And hanging up that phone, what I did was I unsurrendered myself. I don't know if anyone's ever done that. Feel themselves in a state of surrender and then unsurrender themselves by taking their will back. That's exactly what I did. I took my will back, unsurrendered myself, and said, I can do this on my own. Okay. And I believe that had to happen in a way because that moment that happened for me it came about without any work on my part. I don't remember asking for help. I certainly didn't want help, but help happens. And because those two miracles occurred in my life, and I didn't ask for them, I often say that I'm a person for whom miracles can occur without my consent. So I say, it's like, I don't want your help, God. And God was like, I don't care what you want, here it comes. And I go surrendered. And then I took my will back. And I think it was necessary for me because I had to learn to live a life where uh, surrender was something that I worked toward. So I kind of have to work for surrender now. And the work that I do to hopefully find myself in that state of surrender again is the 12 steps to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I find that when I do that work, I can find myself in that state of surrender until, of course, my ego reconstructs itself and makes me convinces me I have to be the big shot again. But that's what I'm working towards anyway. So got sober that day. Now, I told you I'm an alcoholic because I have the physical allergy and the mind of an alcoholic. But here's how I really, really know I'm an alcoholic. This really drove home the extent of my alcoholism. Is that on this day, January 3rd, was my last drink, and I said to myself, and anyone who had wanted to hear it, I'm going to do this by myself. I got this. And then I entered a phase of my life, which was about a year in length, where I uh, was doing sobriety on my own. And I don't know if anyone's tried that here. I do not recommend it at all. My experience is that while I was convinced that alcohol was my problem, I knew alcohol was removed, so my mind, problem solved. I didn't need anybody's help. The problem is over. And then what I learned over this year is that no, problem's not solved because alcohol is not the problem. The problem is my alcoholism, which is my mind, my emotions, my spirit, and the allergy of my body. So that's what makes me an alcoholic, not just the alcohol. So if you take alcohol away from this alcoholic, then what you've done is you've removed my solution to my problem, right? So alcohol is my answer, and it was removed, so I no longer had an answer. And I thought, I'm going to go do this myself. I didn't replace it with any answer. And my experience is over this year, I got really, really sick. I mean, really sick. Sicker than I've ever been. I thought that things would get better, and they got uh, incredibly worse. Like, not just a little worse, a lot worse. And that lasted for about a year. And again, if you're thinking about doing that, I highly recommend you don't do it. So anyway, let's fast forward at the end of this year, where I'm literally crazy, just basically an alcoholic waiting for a drink. The following happened. Now, I knew about AA. I had actually gone to some meetings during this time, so I knew what an AA meeting was like. I knew how to find them. I would go late and leave early, never get a sponsor, any of that kind of good stuff. But I knew about it. So I got a phone call from a woman that my mom sponsored who asked me to take one of the people she sponsored to an AA meeting. I didn't want to do that. But a weird thing happened. I found myself saying yes. So I went and picked up this person to take them to an AA meeting. And I didn't know who this person was. They lived in a part of town I'd never been to. So we went to a meeting in that neighborhood that I'd never been to. And I sat down at this table and I heard a speaker speak at that meeting. Never met this person before. I haven't seen him since. But he looked a lot like me, and he drank like me, and he liked the same music and had similar life experience. But there's one thing that was really different about this guy and me. And that this guy was happy, joyous, and free, and I was going crazy with untreated alcoholism. But what that guy did, that speaker did, was give me a little bit of hope and the belief that maybe if Alcoholics Anonymous works for this guy, and he's happy, maybe it'll work for me, because he and I are very similar. And that was the day I joined Alcoholics Anonymous. So I often say, and by the way, this idea of doing something I didn't want to do, which is taking somebody I know to a meeting I'd never been to, in a place I'd never been, and another miracle happened in my life and changed my life. So once again, I can tell you that I'm an alcoholic, or a person for whom miracles can occur without my consent, because I didn't want this, but it happened. And that was the day I joined AA, and I've been a member of Alcoholics Anonymous since. And I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love being sober, and I love the gifts that it's given me, brought into my life. I got a few minutes, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about these gifts. What can I tell you? I got sober well, when I say sober, I mean, my last drink is the age of 21. And, I remember in the early days of AA, I used to hear people say, don't make any major decisions in the first year. Don't make any major changes. I don't know if anyone has ever heard that in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm really glad I didn't listen to it. I changed everything. I moved out of that house with those 5 other alcoholic dope fiends. I got my own place. I was a college dropout. I immediately, like 3 weeks later, went back to college. I started very slowly recovering from alcoholism. I'm not one of these guys that got it quick. I know it is possible. I've seen it happen, but it is not my experience, mainly because I didn't work the steps, the big book, for a few years. So slow improvement. When I went to school, I realized I'm kind of a little bit smart. I did really, really well. I eventually graduated from college sober. I went through that entire experience sober. I was working there in Irving, Texas, and then I got a job offer in the suburbs of Chicago, in Naperville, Illinois. I took this job. I lived in the city down the south loop of Chicago. I went to I worked out in Naperville, and I went to get my master's degree at Northwestern up in Evanston, Illinois. And that's what I did for a couple of years. And life just kept going. I met someone, fell in love, got married, had 3 kids. Those kids are now adults. I can't get over this idea that my oldest son in May will turn 30. I just cannot. It's just like, that blows my mind. I mean, how's that possible? It's possible, though, because come May 23rd, that's what's going to happen. His brother is 3 years younger than him, and their sister is 3 years younger than the middle. So 3 great kids. They're wonderful human beings. They're amazing adults. That marriage eventually ended in a very painful divorce. So, and that kind of taught me something really important. Um, Throughout my sobriety, so-called negative, bad things have happened to me in my life. And I always thought, well, hey God, you're not showing up here. I need you to take care of this particular thing because this is really painful or uncomfortable or whatever. So where are you when such and such is happening? And what I learned from this divorce, which was really long and very painful, was, God is not making this a painful experience for me. What this is it's a divorce. And in life, divorces are painful. And just because I get sober doesn't mean the life doesn't happen. Life continues, and life has these so-called bad experiences and these so-called good experiences. And I'm the one that judges them to be bad or good. And I think, oh, this is a bad experience. This is wrong. Shouldn't be happening. But in reality, of course it should, because that's how life is. And I had this, I told you, I had this idea of how the way the world should be. It says this when it's talking about step 3 in our big book. I have an idea of how the world should be. And if only the world behaved, everyone, including myself, would be happy. And what I've learned is this idea I have of how the world should be is not how the world is. And so it's up to me to not only accept, but embrace the way the world is, life is, embrace these so-called bad things as well as these good things, and be in the moment throughout it all. And I think that is one of the things that I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I really learned it during this divorce process, is that anything that I judge to be bad or judge to be good, I judge. That's my judgment. Whereas what's happening is life, period, end of story. And that I believe, because what it says in the big book, that God is either everything or he's nothing. He either is or he isn't. That's the choice to be. And I choose that God is everything and God is. Therefore, life is ultimately good. Okay, so that's the way I try to frame things. So if I ever think to myself, oh, that's such a bad thing that happened, I have to ask myself, why am I judging that to be good or bad? So anyway, here's one of the, and I'll just share this one lesson and I'll move on from this. But one of the things I learned through that process was this. I'd be in the moments and painful or frightening or whatever was happening. And what I learned to say to myself was this: you know what? I bet it's going to look really different in 24 hours. And you know what? It did. It always looked different in 24 hours. And that, and what changed between the moment I was in pain or afraid and then 24 hours later was my mind. That's what changed. The situation didn't change. It's how I saw it that changed. And I believe for myself that the true measure of one's serenity, my serenity, is the ability to be serene regardless of the circumstances of life. Right? So no matter what's happening in the world, can I be serene about it? And that's the true measure of serenity. It's really easy to be happy, joyous, and free when things are going your way, right? So the trick is to be happy, joyous, and free when they're not. And that's what I learned from that process. So anyway, what else? Got that divorce. I got married again to Jane, who many of you have heard speak at this meeting, and she's pretty amazing. And she and I have a great life together. I have a really great relationship with my mom, who's here. So hi, Mom, again. She and I get along real well. And we had the opportunity just a couple of weeks ago to travel together and speak, all three of us, in Arizona. It was a real treat to do that. What else can I tell you? I have these are all kind of like circumstances of life that sobriety has brought me, but I'm not going to share with you. I've got a really great job. I have a beautiful home. I have the love of people around me. I am loved, and I feel like I'm lovable, which is very different than the person who came into Alcoholics Anonymous. And these are all great gifts that have come to me in AA. Let me tell you the greatest gift that has been given me, and I believe this is the one that's promised us. So a lot of promises in the big book, and I think they can all be summed up really by this one promise. And the promise is that having had a spiritual awakening is the result of these steps. So what I'm promised is a spiritual awakening by doing the 12 steps, and that's what I've had. And what that means to me is that I have a strong relationship with a power greater than myself. I'm not a religious person. I don't subscribe to a religion, but I believe in this power. And I believe in this power for a few reasons. I can feel it within, right here. right behind my sternum, which is interesting because it's exactly the same place that I felt that pain when I was separated from that power. And I also have a life experience of uh, feeling peace and comfort and love being held in literally in the palms of, of this power's hands. And this power is my own conception, which is a very, very important idea in AA. When we come here, we don't have to believe anyone else's conception of God. And whatever we believe and that works for us is right. Okay? And as I said, I'm not religious. If you had to be here in AA, I couldn't be here. But luckily, you don't have to be. You can believe what you want, whatever works for you. And what I've learned is that this idea that, it says that God as we understood him, I remember I would read that as, okay, so as I understand God, then I can turn my will and life over to that power. So I better start understanding them, right? But in reality, I'll never understand that power. I mean, I have a finite mind and the power is infinite. So how can I ever understand? So to me, what that phrase means is my understanding of my higher power is due to my experience of that power. And I've experienced it in my sobriety. And I believe it's the source of my serenity and peace and everything good in my life. And I may say that judgingly, but I got a lot of good stuff in my life. And I believe it's all due to the power that I found here in Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you're new, the good news that AA brings is, number one, you never have to drink again. And number two, your entire life can change and you can find peace, love, and serenity and live in that state one day at a time for the rest of your life. And Glenn, that's all I got. So thanks everybody. I'm done.